I hope I have the settings correct. There may be a couple glitches along the way, which we'll figure it out. But good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am attorney Francisco Servent, and I'm the founder of Keystone Law Firm and Lifestyle Planning in Chandler, Arizona. We are doing, if you've been following, we've been doing webinars all last year, this year, 2, 3, 4 months, just depending. And the topics are driven by you, driven by people in our circle of influence who have questions about things. And so if you ever have something you want to learn more about, let us know. If it's in our wheelhouse, we will happily talk about it and teach on the topic. Just a couple things about these webinars as we go. We are recording them, and you can see a replay of them on our YouTube channel if you want. So that means what we are saying and recording here is going to be shared publicly. There are a number of people who can't make the specific time slots we have for when we're holding these live, and that's the best way for us to get this information back out to them. So while we will have a Q&A session here, I do want to just encourage you to ask your questions in a way that doesn't reveal anything more than you want posted on YouTube. So you're welcome to ask questions. Keep them generic enough that you don't reveal that confidential information. And also, if your question is very specific to a situation you're going through right now, and you can't quite make it a generic question, I will encourage you to just schedule an appointment and speak with someone one-on-one so that it can stay private and you can get the best guidance possible for that. And then that also just is a reminder for me to say, go to our YouTube channel and you can find all of our prior webinars that we've done. Dozens of them up there now. It's youtube.com/Keystone Law Firm. And you'll find the full recordings there. You know, they're 30 to 60 minutes long, and you can learn a whole lot of stuff that you might be wondering. More info than well, all of my settings got goofed up. So I don't know when my microphone got muted, but we are, that's weird. I don't know how it did that. Anyway, our YouTube channel has all of our prior recordings, so go learn. They're all 30 to 60 minutes, but you can play them faster, and you don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can listen to it at a faster speed if you want, but it's all over there, youtube.com/Keystone Law Firm. So today we are going to talk about mom has dementia. Now what? A little bit of a scary topic sometimes. I do want everybody to just take a second right now, breathe. If you're in this situation, you might be feeling a heavy mix of feelings. It can be scary about what the future holds, maybe grief for the family member, for your mother or whoever else it is. Maybe you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed about where to start. And so we're going to tackle this topic truthfully and with some good things you can do to help remove that sense of overwhelm. But it's understandable that it's not going to go away, right? If you've spent, the last, if you spent, I don't know, any nights up at 2 a.m. Googling for answers, you probably feel a little bit of being in a daze with that kind of a diagnosis. I absolutely want to tell you that is normal. It's a normal reaction. It's a situation you've never been through before, so you're not expected to have all the answers. And in one little webinar on sort of the high level of the topics here, you're not going to get all the answers today, right? The goal of this isn't to turn you into an expert in the field or something that you're going to 100% know everything what to do. It's to move you from that crisis mode feeling of, holy cow, what are we going to do? I'm just putting out fires. Moving from that into management mode, where you've got a little bit of a roadmap of things to do, and you sort of know what at least the next 1 or 2 steps are. Okay, so I know oftentimes there's, before I do, I got to give the disclaimers, all the legal notices. What we're going to talk about today is not specific legal, tax, medical, financial advice for anyone's specific situation. This is general information of an educational nature. If you need specific advice, speak with a qualified professional. I think that goes without saying a lot of times. But you don't want the diagnosis to feel like you're falling off a cliff, right? The moment a doctor says the word, memory issues, cognitive issues, dementia, you want to look at this differently. It's a journey, okay? It's a new chapter of life. It's a difficult one, yes. And the whole roadmap of what life was supposed to be like is probably going to change. But your mom, your loved one is still here, and that's the focus that we're going to shift from trying to cure the disease or the diagnosis, because while there are treatments coming out and things, it is going to shift from curing to caring, just managing and caring for this loved one. Okay, so today, a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to cover. We're going to cover some of the medical groundwork, just some of the basics of what to do in that stage, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a expert on any of the medical stuff, but I, been through enough of these with clients that I can give you a couple tips there. I'm very excited. I have a guest here today, Candace Dutton, who I'll introduce in a little bit. She is the owner of Senior Care Arizona, and she has been doing a lot of this for a long time, exceptionally amazing at what she does. I'll give her a chance to speak today to a few of the different topics, but that'll be the first step. Talk about what are the emergency, critical, legal safety net things to have in place, making sure you've got that stuff to take care of when decisions need to be made. We'll talk about the environment, right? Keeping mom safe in her own space or whatever that looks like. And then if you're the caregiver, you need some specific things too, because if you're not good, it's not good. So we'll go through this, and I hope by the end of the hour, we've lifted some of the fog. We've gotten you to see kind of the next couple steps that you might need to take tomorrow morning or Monday morning. And you don't have to climb the whole mountain today. Just need to know where to put your foot next, okay? So that's where we're going. Okay, so we've taken a breath. We can kind of dive into some of the concepts here. First thing that a lot of families hear is the word dementia. And just so you know, dementia, the diagnosis and how that is being used in the medical community has shifted a lot over the last just 5 years, but even over the last couple decades. It really is a symptom. Okay, it's a symptom. It's not a specific disease diagnosis, right? They're exhibiting signs of dementia, right? It's like the word a fever, right? Child has a fever. Well, the fever isn't the cause. It's a symptom. It's showing that something is happening in the body. It doesn't tell you why. And so to take care of your mom effectively, you actually need to get a little bit more clear on what the diagnosis is. Is it Alzheimer's? Is it vascular dementia? Is it something else completely, right? And so the first step here, that when you first get that kind of diagnosis, that we recommend is usually that first diagnosis is going to come from their primary care doctor or at the hospital. You really need to get a second opinion. Okay, you need to get that specialist involved to really evaluate what's happening, what's the underlying root cause of this. And you'll generally do that with a neurologist. Some geriatricians can do this, but these are specialists that they're looking at a lot more than just that first initial evaluation of, are there some cognitive limitations? And that way you can get the specific diagnosis and make sure that you're aiming for the right kind of treatment on the medical side, because there are different treatment protocols for the different types. But even and even in the course of that, there might be some things to rule out. So a UTI can cause cognitive dysfunction. And that is obviously, it's a very simple treatment plan. A round of antibiotics can clear it up, but it can cause confusion. And so if it's showing up and there should be, but a simple UTI test, get that test. You might look at some vitamin deficiencies, B12, thyroid issues, other medications that they've just started that are interacting weird. Knock out all of that. Okay, get all of those things checked. Make sure it's not one of those things, because those things can usually be resolved completely. And then mom's back. Okay, so once you've kind of gone through those things to eliminate and rule out, then you're going to be moving into the neurologist evaluation of what type of dementia is this. And again, those types are going to give you different treatment plans. And all kinds of different advice on how to manage the situation for the long term. Your goal with the medical team isn't just to fix mom's memory, it's to manage her mood and her safety. We want to address any anxiety, sleep disruptions, agitation. Those all can come on in different levels and in different times depending on the type of dementia. If mom's calm and sleeping well, her quality of life and yours will be significantly higher than if she can remember what she had for breakfast, right? But she's living in a state of panic, right? If that's the condition, if there's a constant state of panic, that you want to be able to see if that can be managed. So that's really first stages of this stuff, right? Drill down into that medical diagnosis, make sure you know what you're dealing with, and make sure you've got people who have an understanding of the treatment and the management of the different types of dementia. Legally and financially, right? This is our specialty. This is what we do. There's a whole giant checklist of things to look for. What I want to give you are the main key pieces of the puzzle that are usually pretty urgent to make sure they are in place. We had this was years and years ago, I had a gal sit down with me, and she was pretty young. I think she was maybe 50 or so, and her husband was in his mid to late 50s. And she sat down with me because their retirement accounts were mostly in her husband's name, and he had sort of been forced into retirement because of a diagnosis years earlier of dementia. And it got to the point where he just couldn't work anymore. They readjusted their finances and just decided he was going to retire. And it got to the point where he really couldn't be managing the finances anymore either. So she went to their bank and their retirement accounts and their financial advisor and gave them all the legal documents, the trust, the power of attorneys, etc., to put her on all the accounts and make sure she could use money to pay the bills. And where their main retirement funds were, they sent a letter back to her after reviewing the documents and said, well, the trust wasn't implemented correctly, and the power of attorney that your husband gave you is too old. We can't recognize either one of these. And so you need to go to court to become your husband's conservator, get court appointed to do that. Well, at that point, it was too late for the husband to legally sign anything new to be able to fix what wasn't done correctly. And so she had to go get conservatorship appointment by the court. And if you haven't been through that or heard of that, it is a painful and expensive process. She had to essentially sue her husband. The court appointed an attorney for him to make sure she wasn't taking advantage of him. And it was about a 9-month battle to get her appointed as conservator. And you're talking 30, 40, $50,000 in legal fees. And she finally got it, finally got the court to give her the authority to access all the money, which is good. But then what she is stuck with at that point is filing annual accountings with the court on how the money is spent exactly to the penny. Every single penny has to be reported. And the court here in Maricopa has a whole accounting department that reviews these, full of accountants. And they essentially are auditing this to make sure it reconciles to the bank statements and everything is appropriate. So when you get this diagnosis, it doesn't mean a dementia diagnosis does not always mean that mom doesn't have the capacity to go sign new legal documents. A lot of times, if it's caught early, there is still sufficient legal capacity to sign the legal documents necessary to put these protections in place to avoid that conservatorship. So when you get that dementia diagnosis, if it's pretty early, you really want to pursue, are the documents we have valid? Are they going to be recognized by the banks and financial institutions and everybody else that mom does business with? Or do we have any at all, or do they need to be updated? And this is the window to really push on that task and get it done. You're also going to want to do a inventory of the financials and the paperwork, organize all the bank accounts, the investments, real estate, the bills, just start getting all that knowledge out of her memory, out of her mind, and taking notes, organizing paperwork, getting the mail so that you can see what's happening, and start to just become that next person who has the information so it can be picked up and moved along when she can no longer do it. So the first document is a durable power of attorney for finances and a healthcare power of attorney for medical decisions. You want to have both of those in place. And then a lot of clients do want to have some type of advance directive that says what their wishes are. Should they be in a terminal condition, in some type of a persistent vegetative state, if they're in essentially a coma and everything's been tried, but they remain in the coma and there's no hope of recovering. A lot of people want a document that says, I don't want to be left on machines indefinitely. And that's called a living will in Arizona. That's another thing to consider putting in place. As far as all the finances and all the bills and stuff, you want to just kind of go on that scavenger hunt. Take this time to do it. Give yourself a couple hours a week to just start sifting through and organizing these things. Look through the bank statements, get the online access going so that you can be monitoring transactions and make sure there's no fraud happening. Another particular case we had, a gal was just helping her brother with life. He had a brain injury a few decades ago. He was able to live on his own for the most part and pay his own bills and things, but he had always given her online access because they knew he needed some help, and so she would just watch things. Well, she saw a weird transaction, and then another like a few rapid fire transactions, all sending thousands of dollars over to Africa. And when she, asked her brother what it was, he was convinced that it was a female who was interested in him and they were establishing a relationship. This was an obvious circumstance of fraud. And So she was able to spot that very quickly and help shut that down. So having somebody who's not necessarily in charge of anything yet, but is there to watch and just make sure things are okay, this is the time to put that in place. This is the time to start putting those things together. I'm going to give you a couple of my thoughts on the home safety audit, but then Candace, I'm gonna have you chime in on this one a little bit more specifically. Once you've kind of got the medical diagnosis in place and you've got the legal documents and sort of know what the finances are, you're doing all these things kind of concurrently, but you really do need to do that, home safety audit, like what's happening in the house and is it appropriate? Can adjustments be made? Let me see if I can pop over to my controls. Yes. All right, Candace, you should be able to turn your microphone on. And so I'll give just a quick introduction to Candace. So I've known Candace for, I don't know, 7, 8 years, something like that. But I've known your family since high school, so we go back even further. Were you able to figure out how to unmute yourself? I hope. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, lovely. So Candace, we've referred a lot of clients to her primarily because she knows the Maricopa County senior care system really, really well. And so anytime somebody's just, I need to navigate something with this, we ask them to speak with Candace, and she always does. And she runs a company, one of, I think, the most successful companies in Arizona on helping people find care homes to live in. And that can be all kinds of different levels of need, whether it's, moving from the house to a home or discharge from a hospital or rehab. Candace is very good at coordinating all of that and making sure that the place is the right place for all the different, family factors that go into deciding something like that. But Candace, give us a couple ideas on home safety, things like that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak with everyone. Excuse me. I love that you're addressing this early on, and just, the goal would always be, how do we keep individuals at home and keep them home and at home safely? So seeing some of your environmental examples is really a great solution. Is small things where you can have something called a home safety evaluation, where a physical therapist would come into the home and look at everything from a physical therapist's eyes. So that's, grab bar recommendations. We have things for commodes to make the commode easier, access in and out of the shower. So just things that maybe you don't even need at the moment, but will set up for future success. And the good news is that something that's covered by insurance. So when you are having that home safety evaluation, great time to ask for a home safety eval and have a professional, as Francisco stated, having a professional come in to help with a different set of eyes, view this. So home safety is really important. Small things like tripping hazards. Sometimes we move those coffee tables because if there's a fall risk and they fall and hit themselves, that can be dangerous. So small things like that. The number one thing we look at are bathrooms and the kitchen. Number one place that falls happen are typically in the restroom, reaching, stretching, making sure things are accessible, as well as in the kitchen. So I love that you're proactive, and just to know that, you do have that benefit coverage through your insurance for a professional to come in and do an evaluation.
Yeah, so that's Medicare is generally something that'll cover that?
Yep, Medicare, as well as typically any insurance, would cover a therapist evaluation, physical therapy. Yeah.
Fabulous. That's fabulous.
The doctor, your physician, your parents' your primary physician would write that order for you, or your neurologist.
Excellent. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Those are things we don't even think about sometimes, like, who do I go? Where do I pay? I don't want to pay. But yeah, having somebody come in who does this is really ideal.
Absolutely.
The car key conversation is honestly, it's one of the toughest conversations that we recommend having, and we know is tough. But at some point, that conversation needs to happen. The earlier it's talked about, the less scary it'll be when it comes time to surrender the keys. And so the more discussions you can have about these things before it's necessary to pull the trigger, that's going to make it less scary. It's going to be less shocking. So, early in the process, start having that discussion of, Mom, at what point do you think you're no longer going to be safe to drive? And just start planting those seeds. You hope that mom or dad comes around to the decision on their own, but at some point that doesn't happen. We've heard families do things kind of funny. They just lose the car keys and we don't know where the car keys are, or disconnect a battery and the car just doesn't work anymore. Just, there are ways you can go around it that aren't as direct, but having that conversation early and often is something that can be useful. Yeah, anytime, Candace.
I was just going to share with you too, if you have concerns, and a lot of families do, you can also confide in your parent's physician, again, the primary care doctor or neurologist. Or you can also submit anonymously online to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they will actually send your loved one a little message in the mail saying, hey, come on in for a driving test. And that way it takes you out of that role to make the decision, and it's more of an objective role where the DMV would have your parent do a driving test and make sure that they are safe to continue. We also see this after if someone's had a stroke, or you can, had any type of change in condition. So if you confide in your physician, sometimes your physician will fill that form out anonymously. If not, we do recommend family filling that out, because it does take some of the pressure off of you, especially if you're going to move into that role of caregiver. So
yeah, absolutely. And then what's been really cool over the last 10 years or so, just seen a lot of really good technology develop to help make the house safer, help keep you more informed if somebody's not living in the house with mom or dad. The wandering prevention tools, there's caregivers, there's all kinds of systems that can be very helpful to supplement, or I should say extend somebody's ability to stay at home if they don't have somebody living there, or even if they do and that person needs to run errands or is going to be gone at work or something like that, that can really extend their ability to stay at home, which is a lot of my clients' preferences, is to stay at home as long as possible. So look into those tools. There are plenty out there, and you can, and most of them are generally pretty easy to set up. Just like most stuff these days. If you're stepping into this role as caregiver, you're going to be the one to coordinate all this. That's generally how it goes. You're going to become that central point of contact. And being the central point of contact for somebody living with dementia, you really do want to have them name you as healthcare power of attorney. And as Candace mentioned in the chat, Arizona has a second piece of that's for mental health purposes. You want to make sure that's part of your healthcare power of attorney. That way you have full authority to speak with and coordinate all of the services they're going to need. You really don't let yourself believe because you're the named healthcare agent, you have to be the person to do it all. Okay. That is not the expectation. It's not the law. But when someone's designated as an agent, don't convince yourself that that's true, because that will wear you down to where you can't be the best caregiver for mom. So you're going to really focus on building out the team that your mom needs. And a lot of this is going to be covered by insurance, sometimes not all of it. And so you'll be building out that budget as well for what those expenses look like, and roping in siblings as you can, but you're allowed to delegate. Okay. You're completely allowed to delegate. You just want to make sure you're delegating appropriately to the people who are qualified to do what you're delegating. There are a lot of informal caregiver arrangements that are out there. If it's not a family member, and it's not a licensed caregiver, do not let them move into the house and trade caregiving for free rent or something like that. That kind of informal arrangement is a bomb waiting to happen. Um, a, a I mean, I see this too many times. We've had two big cases over the years where somebody moved in and was able to completely wipe out somebody's finances. One case was like $600,000, another one was over $800,000, and yes, it's a crime. Yes, charges get filed. Yes, we file lawsuits to go after it, but it is a nightmare. There's no guarantee of recovery. You just don't want those kinds of informal arrangements to end up completely devastating the financial circumstances. So if you're going to bring caregivers into the home, they need to be licensed. They need to be insured. They need to know what they're doing and have those protections in place so that there's an insurance policy there to fix things if something doesn't go according to plan. Candace, I know this is one of your big areas. I have to ask for your input on this. Just what are some other things that people should be thinking about in this role?
Absolutely. I would say, expanding on your bringing in help, if your parent has a long-term care insurance policy, it's really important that you utilize a professional agency that is has a professional license, is with the state. Because when you go to utilize your long-term care insurance policy, if you're paying someone privately, it's not going to count for your long-term care insurance. And we've seen that where people will go about 90 days paying privately to activate their long-term care, and then it's denied because it's not a licensed agency. So very important. And I think that as you're stating, early preparation, as Francis was saying, early discussion, preparation, having some of these discussions ahead of time with your family, just to say, hey, what does care look like as if we have this diagnosis, and as we make a safety plan, or we make a plan, obviously we all want to stay in our home. That's where I'm going to age in my home. I'm going to live in my home forever as well. That's all of our plan A, but what does that plan B look like? And a lot of times we do have that fortunate ability to speak with our loved ones just to say, hey, what does it look like for you? And how could we accommodate your request? So I think those are very important, is always using licensed professionals. There's a lot of scams out there, and this is a time where you're vulnerable. You don't always have time to do the research, and maybe a friend of a friend has recommended you to this great person that's helped out their parent. But these are areas where you want to be concerned. They're obviously in your loved one's home. They have access to mail. They have access to, anything in your home that's of either sentimental value or real value. So that is obviously a very vulnerable space. So working with people who are licensed, companies who are licensed, bonded, and insured. And you do want to ask for do they fingerprint and background check the people coming into your home? You'll be really surprised how many care agencies do not fingerprint and background check. And that's very, very important.
Yeah. Yes, please. And the other thing they have access to is they have access to your parent, which the whole world doesn't know their diagnosis, right? And so it's as simple as them putting them in the car, driving them to the bank, coming up with some story that convinces your mom or dad to convince the banker to put them on the account or something. And bankers are also, they're supposed to be looking for red flags like this, but they don't always catch it. And so, it's a high level of trust that you're giving to somebody. When you're thinking about dividing up kind of responsibilities, you definitely want to have one person, and it might be you in both roles, but you want to have only one person who's like the last stop for all the medical and care decisions, right? That's one person. That doesn't mean, let me rephrase that. If you've named your two kids as your medical power of attorney, and they're both on their joint, then that's not uncommon. We see that work as long as they understand how to work together. That can be fine. If your kids don't get along, don't name them jointly hoping this will force them to communicate and all of a sudden resolve their relationship. It won't. You need to be wise in who you name. But there should sort of be like that one last stop for medical decisions. And then for financial decisions, we recommend it be one person. Don't ever make that a joint role. It is very difficult to implement at the banks. And it's very difficult even for if you put two people on there who work well together, etc. It's very difficult to basically have two treasurers of the company. Who's responsible for that final, we decided to pay these bills, or we kept the records like this. You really want one person in charge of that financial role. That medical, you probably want to find somebody who's regularly available to just give you a break. Having somebody who's available to just like, hey, I'm going to need to run to the store, run errands twice a week. Can I just rely on you to be here for that 3 hours? Or I've got my own doctor's appointments, or whatever it is. Somebody who, and maybe it's a team of people, but that sort of like person who can just give you a break. And then I think it's would be a great idea to find somebody in the family who, like, your job, you're not designated anything formal. Your job is to make sure they're still fun. Your job is to make sure whatever activities, bring over the puppy, bring over the grandkids, like whatever, like that's your job. Just keep the fun happening, right? Keep the family going, keep the activities, when there's dinner, you coordinate bringing mom, or just all the things like that. That sort of activity coordinator, that fun person, that's a really important role because that's quality of life. And when quality of life stays high, that's what we want. We want quality of life to stay high. Just a little bit about, what to expect in your role as communicating with somebody who's living with dementia. Okay, it does start to shift. It's not always the same type of communication style. Up until now, your relationship with mom is just everything that it's been for decades, right? But dementia changes those kind of rules of engagement, and it's a hard shift because oftentimes we like to argue with our parents, and that kind of communication is not going to be the same going forward, right? And as dementia progresses, or any of the type of cognitive issues like this, you're going to have to watch and adjust. Okay. A lot of times, instead of arguing or correcting directly something that is incorrect, you're really leaning into the whole concept of redirecting the conversation and really just entering into their reality for a minute. If a conversation springs up that was 20 years ago, just lean into it, ask questions, prompt it, spur those memories, feed into it, and let them enjoy that conversation instead of we just talked about this yesterday, or you talked about it again, you always talk about this stuff. To the extent you can, lean into it, spur it, feed it, nurture those memories, because they're enjoying that, and that's giving them the joy in that moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. As the brain changes, it's harder to process complex sentences, harder to simplify what they want to say, and your goal is to just take it one little piece at a time, right? One little step at a time. So when you're working with them on things they need to do, you're breaking it down. You are breaking it down simpler and simpler and simpler. and making it so the steps and instructions are simpler and simpler and simpler. You might have to learn to be more patient to let them process. If you are asking questions or telling them things to do, it might take a little bit more time. That uncomfortable silence, we're used to question, answer, conversation. You're going to find that pace slow down. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with a little pause every now and then, right? So get used to that, because preempting their answers for them can be frustrating for anybody. But letting them percolate, see if they come up with their answers, is going to give them the autonomy and the independence that we all crave. And then when language and words are starting to not work as well, just really, really lean into your body language, lean into eye contact, lean into, music, touch on the hand, just lean into all the other ways we communicate. And those are going to become more and more important, right? It's finding the new way to keep that relationship, to give them the independence, to make sure they know they're heard and what they want is still being taken into consideration. Candace, any other thoughts on this topic? There's so much that can be taught on this one, but
Yeah, I'd say communication connection is really important. I love a few things that you said. So number one is, making sure you still have those quality interactions. So a lot of times families, as you move into that role of caregiver, if you choose to do that, can be really inundated with all the tasks of life, right? The cooking, the cleaning, the grocery shopping, doing mom and dad's laundry, all of that you forget. Those things, if needed, can be outsourced. What we have a hard time outsourcing are those really intimate moments, right? Taking mom and dad to the play at the school for the kids, or like you said, facilitating with the puppy. It's hard to hire for that type of interaction. We always say we can hire great care. I can never replace you guys as caregivers, or as family members, right? That loving hug and that kiss and that warm embrace, you own that. You own that interaction, and we can never replace it by caregivers. So I'd say as you engage, even telling your family members, hey, if I'm starting to get overwhelmed or you notice a change in me, how is family going to have that conversation with you? Because a lot of times we focus on mom and dad, right? Their health, their weight loss, their nutrition. But who is it that's going to check in on you and saying, hey, I'm noticing you're not sleeping so much lately, or I'm getting worried about you. Maybe it's your friend that you've canceled 3 times a lunch because you're worried about mom. Those are small indicators that, again, we want you to stay well, because without you, your parent doesn't have that caretaker. And so we start to look at like, hey, what can you let go of? Maybe you have a meal prep person come in, and we help with this all the time. So, hey, meal prep, or someone to come in and do laundry, just to help you a little bit, have that, release you from that while you do the fun stuff. So don't lose the fun, and then embrace the relationship portion. The other thing I would say is really important as adult children is to help maintain your parents', dignity and self-respect. Oftentimes, it's really important when it comes to personal needs such as toileting, or even showering. We really look at, hey, is it time to maybe hire someone in to come in and help? And that's really about maintaining your loved one's dignity and self-respect. A lot of times, too, we see this is a sensitive issue if you have an opposite sex parent that you're caring for. So saying daughter's helping father or son's helping mom. So anytime it comes to personal care, that's also a time if you feel uncomfortable. That's normal, that's natural. It's also very common for anybody to have sometimes negative feelings towards caregivers. And the one thing I want to caution is, as you start stacking these hats on, right? You're caregiver, you're the chef, you're the cook. It's normal for your loved one or your parent to start having some frustration towards caregivers. And the hardest thing for us to do, because we're wearing all these hats at once, is to understand that this is frustration towards caregiver, and this is normal. And it's not frustration as me as a child, the adult child, or the daughter or the son. And that gets really hard as mom and dad are getting frustrated with me. you may start to argue back. And that's usually a sign too, if you have that insight to yourself to say, hey, I might need a break here. I might need a little more help. It's wonderful when we can offer this care. It's just really important that we know our own limits. And if someone can coach us from the outside and just saying, hey, I'm worried about you, and doing that in a loving way so that you don't burn out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that before, about being the caregiver can kind of, it changes the dynamic. It can change the relationship dynamic. And that's really tough to admit, but it can.
Yep, very much so.
I mean, that's kind of what the last couple things that I was going to say was, you can't play the martyr in this role at all. You are a very critical part of the care, and when it is a dementia diagnosis, it might be long term. This is not a sprint. You're going to be in marathon style, so you have to be able to pace yourself, and you do need to plan for your own breaks from it, where you can completely unplug from all the responsibilities except for maybe an emergency call. No, mom's okay, and you can let your brain go for a couple days or some significant period of time where you do get to decompress. And those can be planned well in advance, so you have enough time to get things in place. But if you don't get that, you burn out. And I think the last time I looked at statistics, it was something that 60% of caregivers actually passed away before the person they were caring for. And we can all surmise why that is, but that's a very difficult fact to stare at. And we know if you're not sleeping good, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're stressed out constantly, if you're just running and running and running, all those things are bad for our health. So build in your safety valves, build in your network of resources and people and teams so that you're not running day to day at that red line energy level for yourself. So day to day, you're in a tolerable, energy level, and you still have periodic breaks from this. If you are in any of this right now, the Banner Alzheimer's Association is excellent. They have such phenomenal, I've gotten so much good feedback from people who've worked with them on all kinds of resources. And there's lots of other local organizations. If you're in the Sun Lakes area, Neighbors Who Care is an excellent organization that helps people stay at home and helps get people to and from doctor's appointments, all on a volunteer basis. But just look around your community. There are lots of these good resources out there. I don't know, are there any other big ones like that, Candace, that you know of?
We have the Banner, as you said, Banner Alzheimer's Institute, also Barrows Neurological has a ton of resources, and also the Alzheimer's. We have an Alzheimer's chapter here in Arizona that's very, very helpful. They have awareness, they have resources. You can organize a walk, tangible ways to help your loved one in a different capacity. But I was just going to add that anytime you connect with your neurologist, that neurologist will have a social worker, and that social worker is there to help with resources and kind of start to prompting you to start thinking about some things you haven't thought about, and also sometimes to connect you with care, short-term and long-term opportunities. So those would be really important. Even if you don't go through like Banners or Barrows Neurological, they do have other, I know East Valley Neurology is very popular, and they will all have that social worker, and you can ask to speak with them. Again, they don't charge you anything. They're usually there in the office. You can also ask for a private conversation because this is obviously very sensitive to bring up in front of your parent. So know that you do have that built-in support, and that is, also another opportunity. And they specialize in all of this, so they're going to be able to answer your questions.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to Q&A. Those were the main things I wanted to hit on. I do want to again introduce Candace. There's her contact information and her company website, seniorcareaz.com. If you want to reach out to her team, because you're dealing with some of this right now, they welcome a call, point you guys in the right direction. She's given you a lot of good tips already today. I did see a question come in from Sarah on the chat. Let's say you have a senior loved one who currently lives by himself, still has full mental capacity, but you want to open the conversation with them. Is there such thing as a pre-power of attorney, like a directive for what your loved one would want if that were necessary in the future? Yeah, I mean, that's actually what the power of attorneys and directives are, is you're sitting here now while you have capacity saying, you know what, in this circumstance, this is what I would want. And you're designating somebody for financial, designating somebody for medical, for mental health powers. You're designating those people if it's ever needed. And you're putting down wishes about, it might be just the one end of life decision, or you could put more things in there. Here's the type of setting I would want to live in if I had the need for memory care. Would I want to stay at home? I'm okay going to a facility of some kind, or I would prefer a private group home, or you can put all kinds of things into those pre-instructions. Most of the time, if you're doing that with your loved one, it's kind of a conversational piece because it's all hypothetical in some ways, but you're going to learn a lot about what their preferences are. So the legal documents you do absolutely can put in place, and then sort of the more specifics of preferences on kinds of medical treatment or care would be more conversational. You mentioned a power of attorney being too old. Is there a time limit on power of attorneys? No, Arizona doesn't have a time limit on power of attorneys. There's no law in Arizona that says a power of attorney expires after this long. The law in Arizona just says, here's how to execute a valid power of attorney. The flip side of that is that Arizona does not have a law that says, hey, everybody out there, if you are presented with a valid power of attorney and you don't honor it, you're liable for like whatever problem comes by you not honoring it. So there's no expiration date and there's no penalty for banks and institutions to refuse to honor it. And that's what's missing in Arizona law, is some kind of requirement that they honor a valid power of attorney. And so you see each institution, each company has their own policy internally about whether they will honor them or not. And internal policies at banks and financial companies, they're not consistent, and most of them say something ridiculous like, we'll only honor if it was signed in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So completely impractical to try to base your decisions on what their policies are, because they can also change them. So we generally, we recommend don't let them get more old than a few years. Our practice is to meet with our clients once a year and say what's new, and just kind of give it the rubber stamp of approval. So there's a law firm behind it, but there's nothing like that. Candace also mentioned Hospice of the Valley having a dementia supportive care and education team. That's really cool, funded by insurance. That's great. The Hospice of the Valley is phenomenal. So they now have a dementia care. That's great. Another comment, several institutions requested that I sign an affidavit that a durable power of attorney is still valid. Yeah, so some institutions are doing that. Not all of them. The one in the example I gave earlier today, they had signed their trust and power of attorneys and everything about 8 or 10 years before she needed to use them. And that was old enough that the companies were like, nope. And what happens when they say, no, we're not going to honor it, is they've also now learned that her husband has dementia, and so they freeze the accounts. So it's not like we're not going to honor it, but he can still write checks and stuff. We're not going to honor it, and the accounts are frozen. So it creates a bigger problem. All right, we are about out of time. Candace, thank you so much for joining me. I love seeing your face, and I love working with you on our client stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
You're welcome back anytime, okay?
Thank you so much. Nice to meet everybody. If you have any needs, feel free to reach out at any time. We look forward to helping you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.